Hey, Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At this 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I'd like to speak about Africa's role in the future of this organization. However, it's impossible to do that without first considering the collective role that Africa played in its founding, which was small and relatively insignificant. Of the 51 member states involved in the founding of the United Nations in 1945, only 4 were African: Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, and South Africa. It is important to point out that the United Nations came into being in the aftermath of World War II because of the inability of its predecessor, the League of Nations, to avert a large-scale global conflict, which had been its guiding purpose when it was founded in 1920 at the end of the First World War. Out of the 42 founding member states of the League of Nations, only 3 were African: Liberia, the Union of South Africa, and Ethiopia. Egypt was to join later in 1937. Africa's overall participation in the organization's founding was minimal and relatively unimportant. That's because before all the other talks and meetings, representatives from a group of 14 nations gathered in Berlin for a series of discussions that began in 1884 and which led to the partitioning and formal colonization of the African continent, which is also called the Scramble for Africa. It has famously been written that past is prologue. Well, in the past, the majority of the 54 nations that now comprise Africa were never offered a seat at the table where plans for a new world order were being drawn. But, Madam President, as fate would have it, the tables are turning, and Africa's role in the authorship of whatever is yet to come for this world is going to be huge, and it will be consequential. According to this organization's own projections, by the year 2050, more than 25% of the world's population is expected to come from the African continent. Additionally, by 2050, 1/3 of all young people aged between 15 to 24 will be residing on the African continent. So you see, the future of this world is African. Allow me to say this once again a little louder for those of you in the back. The future is African. Already today, Africa is a catalyst for human potential and development, as well as for economic reform and ecological stability. Africa is a catalyst for systemic change. If this reality, which is fact-based and straightforward, seems provocative or unsettling, perhaps it's because you are viewing it through the lens of centuries of filters, colonialism and imperialism, and the resulting implicit bias. Maybe you are unaware of the resilience of African nations or their remarkable ability to make a strong comeback just when you think it's safe to count them out. That is what is happening right now in my own country, Ghana. Our constitution limits leaders to 2 4-year terms. In January, I was sworn in for a second term, which, let me point out, was non-consecutive with my first term. Our currency, the Ghana cedi, was rapidly depreciating, faced with rising inflation, a huge debt burden, and low morale amongst our citizens. My new administration settled down quickly and embarked on an ambitious program of comprehensive transformation designed to restructure Ghana's economic foundation and enhance our competitive standing globally. We refer to this process of recalibration as our reset agenda. In just 8 months, we have achieved significant reduction in inflation from 23.8% in December 2024 to 11.5% in August 2025, restoring price stability for our citizens. Additionally, our currency, the Ghana cedi, has appreciated considerably against other currencies, with Bloomberg reporting it as the best performing currency in the world at one point. Our improved sovereign credit rating reflects increasing investor confidence in our economy. And our 24-hour economy initiative promises to transform our economy. And there's a renewed willingness amongst our people to trust that their elected officials have Ghana's interests at heart and that we're progressing together. Madam President, I believe that in honor of this milestone celebration, the United Nations should also embark on a process of serious recalibration and establish its own reset agenda. Since the organization's founding, the number of UN member nations has nearly quadrupled. And quite frankly, it is not the same world that it was back then when the UN was formed. I mentioned earlier that I began my second non-consecutive term as president this past January. My first term ended in January 2017. In that span of time, 8 years, the world has changed with such ferocity. My first days in office after my return felt as though I had just awakened from a Rip Van Winkle-style sleep. Now, no, that was only after 8 years. Imagine then what it will be like after 80 years since the founding of the United Nations. In 1945, the sun had not yet set on the largest empire in history. The most common mode of international travel was by sea. The personal computer had not been invented, let alone made portable. And television, a new convenience, was still in its infancy, albeit in black and white color. Relations between the US and the Soviet Union were turning frosty, with Winston Churchill declaring that an iron curtain has descended across the European continent. Fast track 80 years on, in today's world, hundreds of thousands of commercial flights take off and land every day. Libraries have been digitized so that volumes of literature can exist on a small device, small enough to fit inside your pocket. We live in a world of cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, social media, the internet and its dark hidden dungeon of the dark web, all of which carry a potential threat to global peace and security. Climate change is real, and we're fighting a losing battle against the loss of Maldives and other island nations to the rising sea level, against the loss of Timbuktu to desertification, and the Amazon forest to global warming and deforestation. Madam President, the UN Founding Charter is outdated when it comes to representation in this August Assembly. The most powerful post-World War II nations are still being rewarded with an almost totalitarian guardianship over the rest of the world. And yet, the first sentence in Chapter 2, Article 1 of the UN Charter declares that the organization is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its members. If this were true, and was the case, a continent as large as Africa, with its numerous UN member states, would have at least one permanent seat on the Security Council. Furthermore, we believe that veto power should not be restricted to only 5 nations, nor should it be absolute.
It is 10 o'clock. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Biney, and tonight is a big night. As the world, tonight, 27th March, as the world celebrates Ghana for its big achievements at the UN, in New York, as the world celebrates Ghana. Back home locally, Charlie, we did bleed. 5-1, that's unacceptable. But today is our first big show, and we've entitled it the Friday Night Show. We're going to have an amazing time for the next 1 hour. We're just doing a bit of test transmissions to see how this works. But I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to do this with you. We go straight to our first story. This week, everybody has been talking about Ghana. We made a bold move, we made a big move, and we thank His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Abosa salute. Now, some would like to call it, a big move, but to be honest, this whole process started with our previous president. He started moves. He unfortunately weren't able to get a video to prove it, but most of this began with our previous president. He sets the pace, and our own president, our current president, the first gentleman of the land, nailed it. He's done such an amazing job. We're not going to delve into the story, but before we do that, I'd like us to play the video for you to know what has happened over the week with regards to that.
This success goes to all of you, but most of all it goes to those who people wanted to be forgotten. This has gone on a record, and the record of the universal body that we all accept, the United Nations, that this was the gravest crime against humanity. Our ancestors must be rejoicing in their graves. And all the torture and adversity they went through, they must be happy that this day the world has recognized that they are not forgotten, and that the pain they went through and the torture they went through has been recognized by the United Nations, the world's highest body that we all ascribe to. Before we went to the UN today, we went to the African burial grounds, and we all know the history behind the African burial grounds. We said Christian prayers, we said Muslim prayers, we said traditional African prayers. We poured libation and called on our ancestors to stand behind us in what we're going to do today. And today, I think that they answered our call. Yep. And we achieved success. But this is not the end. This is the beginning. What we've achieved today creates a platform for the struggle for reparatory justice. And so we must not rest because we have achieved this success. We must take this success and begin to work so that those who denied our ancestors their humanity, those who denied our ancestors their dignity, can accept the truth that this is what happened. The revisionists and all those who would seek to erase them out of the footnotes of history. Today, we've accepted that this was a grave crime against humanity, the gravest indeed, and that the next steps in terms of reparations, in terms of justice, in terms of apology, are what we need to work on. And we need to keep this coalition. We can't achieve it alone. This victory is not for Ghana. We did it for the whole Africa and all people of African descent. And I believe that if we keep this coalition, we will take the next steps together. And I'm sure that the unity that we have shown will lead us to the end, so that at the time that we have gotten to the destination, our ancestors, humanity, and their dignity will be restored once again. Today's victory is to ensure that we do not forget, and will never forget. As long as this resolution has been passed, our ancestors will never ever be forgotten. Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and...
Welcome back. Now, before we continue, I need you to understand that the previous year, the President was at UN, And he made a very profound statement. It's as though he announced his move. And in that speech, a lot of important things were captured. Now I want us to listen to it, come back, and compare the victory speech we just watched and the speech he made before 2026. Because it's very important that we put the two side by side. And then I can tell you where exactly I foresee or basically what is going to happen next from this. Because most people are asking questions. What next? Is it just a diplomatic trophy where we've agreed on paper but in reality nothing is going to happen? Or it's a strategic move for a long-term thing? We need to understand all these. So I need us to watch that video and then we'll come back and you'll feel the depths of my analysis.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At this 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I'd like to speak about Africa's role in the future of this organization. However, it's impossible to do that without first considering the collective role that Africa played in its founding, which was small and relatively insignificant. Of the 51 member states involved in the founding of the United Nations in 1945, only 4 were African: Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, and South Africa. It is important to point out that the United Nations came into being in the aftermath of World War II because of the inability of its predecessor, the League of Nations, to avert a large-scale global conflict, which had been its guiding purpose when it was founded in 1920 at the end of the First World War. Out of the 42 founding member states of the League of Nations, only 3 were African: Liberia, the Union of South Africa, and Ethiopia. Egypt was to join later in 1937. Africa's overall participation in the organization's founding was minimal and relatively unimportant. That's because before all the other talks and meetings, representatives from a group of 40 nations gathered in Berlin for a series of discussions that began in 1884 and which led to the partitioning and formal colonization of the African continent, which is also called the Scramble for Africa. It has famously been written that past is prologue. Well, in the past, the majority of the 54 nations that now comprise Africa were never offered a seat at the table where plans for a new world order were being drawn. But, Madam President, as fate would have it, the tables are turning, and Africa's role in the authorship of whatever is yet to come for this world is going to be huge, and it will be consequential. According to this organization's own projections, by the year 2050, more than 25% of the world's population is expected to come from the African continent. Additionally, by 2050, 1/3 of all young people aged between 15 to 24 will be residing on the African continent. So you see, the future of this world is African. Allow me to say this once again a little louder for those of you in the back. The future is African. Already today, Africa is a catalyst for human potential and development, as well as for economic reform and ecological stability. Africa is a catalyst for systemic change. If this reality, which is fact-based and straightforward, seems provocative or unsettling, perhaps it's because you are viewing it through the lens of centuries of filters, colonialism and imperialism, and the resulting implicit bias. Maybe you are unaware of the resilience of African nations or their remarkable ability to make a strong comeback just when you think it's safe to count them out. That is what is happening right now in my own country, Ghana. Our constitution limits leaders to 2 4-year terms. In January, I was sworn in for a second term, which, let me point out, was non-consecutive with my first term. Our currency, the Ghana cedi, was rapidly depreciating, faced with rising inflation, a huge debt burden, and low morale amongst our citizens. My new administration settled down quickly and embarked on an ambitious program of comprehensive transformation designed to restructure Ghana's economic foundation and enhance our competitive standing globally. We refer to this process of recalibration as our reset agenda. In just 8 months, we have achieved significant reduction in inflation from 23.8% in December 2024 to 11.5% in August 2025, restoring price stability for our citizens. Additionally, our currency, the Ghana cedi, has appreciated considerably against other currencies, with Bloomberg reporting it as the best performing currency in the world at one point. Our improved sovereign credit rating reflects increasing investor confidence in our economy, and our 24-hour economy initiative promises to transform our economy. And there's a renewed willingness amongst our people to trust that their elected officials have Ghana's interests at heart and that we're progressing together. Madam President, I believe that in honor of this milestone celebration, the United Nations should also embark on a process of serious recalibration and establish its own reset agenda. Since the organization's founding, the number of UN member nations has nearly quadrupled. And quite frankly, it is not the same world that it was back then when the UN was formed. I mentioned earlier that I began my second non-consecutive term as president this past January. My first term ended in January 2017. In that span of time, 8 years, the world has changed with such ferocity. My first days in office after my return felt as though I had just awakened from a Rip Van Winkle-style sleep. Now, no, that was only after 8 years. Imagine then what it will be like after 80 years since the founding of the United Nations. In 1945, the sun had not yet set on the largest empire in history. The most common mode of international travel was by sea. The personal computer had not been invented, let alone made portable. And television, a new convenience, was still in its infancy, albeit in black and white color. Relations between the US and the Soviet Union were turning frosty, with Winston Churchill declaring that an iron curtain has descended across the European continent. Fast track 80 years on. In today's world, hundreds of thousands of commercial flights take off and land every day. Libraries have been digitized so that volumes of literature can exist on a small device, small enough to fit inside your pocket. We live in a world of cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, social media, the internet and its dark hidden dungeon of the dark web, all of which carry a potential threat to global peace and security. Climate change is real, and we're fighting a losing battle against the loss of Maldives and other island nations to the rising sea level, against the loss of Timbuktu to desertification and the Amazon forest to global warming and deforestation. Madam President, the UN Founding Charter is outdated when it comes to representation in this August Assembly. The most powerful post-World War II nations are still being rewarded with an almost totalitarian guardianship over the rest of the world. And yet, the first sentence in Chapter 2, Article 1 of the UN Charter declares that the organization is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its members. If this were true, and was the case, a continent as large as Africa, with its numerous UN member states, would have at least one permanent seat on the Security Council. Furthermore, we believe that veto power should not be restricted to only 5 nations, nor should it be absolute. There must be a mechanism in this House for the General Assembly to challenge a veto. No single nation should be able to exercise an absolute veto to serve its own interests in a dispute. In 1995, during the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela stood in this very spot, and he said, "The United Nations has to reassess its role, redefine its profile, and reshape its structures. It should truly reflect the diversity of our universe and ensure equity among the nations in the exercise of power within the system of international relations in general and the Security Council in particular." I close quotations. 30 years later, we African leaders are still making the same simple request for a permanent seat on the Security Council with the power of a veto. So today, Madam President, I stand here in this exact spot and ask the world, if not now, then when? We demand not only a reform of the Security Council, but also a reset of the global financial architecture, which is currently rigged against Africa. Africa must have a greater say in the world's multilateral financial institutions. And while I'm making requests, I'd like to call for the removal of the blockade on Cuba. As Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, our nation's founder, famously said, "We seek to be friends with all and enemies to none." The Cuban people shed their blood on African soil in the fight against apartheid. And indeed, Cuba has been and continues to be a faithful friend of Africa. You see, the very fact that I can stand here and ask these things and say these things, and the fact that all nations can ostensibly gather here to address critical global issues, air our grievances, and express our concerns, that is what makes the survival of this organization so important. In every old city or village, you'll find a town square, or a courtyard, or a plaza that once served as a gathering space for the citizens of the community and their leaders. Meetings and celebrations were held there, as were trials and elections. And these were spaces that brought people together and held them together as a community. Sadly, time and technology have eroded these spaces. Madam President, in many ways, the United Nations is the proverbial town square of our modern global village. And it has never been more critical for us to protect this one space that brings and holds the world nations together as a community. The internet, social media platforms, and artificial intelligence offer us the illusion of connectivity, when in fact what they do is reinforce isolation by using algorithms that ensure that we do not receive new ideas and perspectives, but rather more of the same content. We are served alternative facts and manipulated images, making it easy to disseminate disinformation and sow seeds of division amongst communities. Madam President, these are dangerous times. Our world is currently experiencing a rise in nationalism and economic instability. There's a general breakdown of multilateralism. Various acts of aggression have been committed against the sovereignty of others, and nations are attempting to circumvent the very safeguards that were put in place to prevent large-scale global conflict. These conditions are all too similar to the ones that led to the League of Nations' failure in fulfilling its mandate. The denial of visas to President Abbas and the Palestinian delegation sets a bad precedent and should be deeply worrying to all member nations of the United Nations. Ghana recognized the state of Palestine in 1988 and supported a two-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a two-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here is the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop. The crimes in Gaza must stop. Madam President, I also want to draw particular attention to the conflict in Sudan, which this body has described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. 12 million people have had to flee their homes. And when we speak of migration, we refer to the 12 million new Sudanese refugees, whom we as a global community should be willing to assist in much the same way that many member nations readily assisted new refugees coming out of Ukraine. Let's dispense with the euphemisms and dog whistles and speak frankly. It is not a mystery that when leaders of Western nations complain of their migration problems, they are often referring to immigrants from the global south. But many of those immigrants are climate refugees. And interestingly, the global north emits 75% more greenhouse gases than the global south. However, the effects of climate change are more severe in the global south because we lack the resources to address them effectively. And so when the desert encroaches on our villages and towns and they become unlivable, we are forced to flee. Warsan Shire, a Somali-born prophet, a Somali-British poet born in Kenya to Somalian refugee parents, was London's first youth poet laureate. She writes in her poem titled Home. And it says, you have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one bends their palms under trains beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled mean something more than just a journey. Madam President, we cannot normalize cruelty. We cannot normalize hatred. We cannot normalize xenophobia and racism. If we're going to tell a story, let's not tell its slant. Let's tell all the truth. When we speak of migrants, we speak of Mami Ewusi Mensah Frimpong, a judge on the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. She's the first black female judge on any of California's 4 federal district courts. She was born here in America to immigrant parents from Ghana. We speak of Peter Bosman, a medical doctor in Ghana who moved to the town of Piran in Slovenia in the 1980s and later became the first black mayor of Piran, the first black mayor in Slovenia and in the whole of Eastern Europe. We speak of T. Michael, the iconic Ghanaian Norwegian artist and designer. And of course, we speak of the late Kofi Annan, former United Nations Secretary General. Former United Nations Secretary General and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, who was born in Ghana but spent his adulthood in various places in America and Europe. These are people who have brought great distinction to the countries that they decided to call home. Just as the migrants and the children of migrants before them did, I dare say these are not invaders. These are not criminals. Madam President, the slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. As the African champion on reparations, Ghana intends to introduce a motion in this August body to that effect. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken against their will and transported to create wealth for the powerful Western nations. We must demand reparations for the enslavement of our people and the colonization of our land that resulted in the theft of our natural resources, as well as the looting of artifacts and other items of cultural heritage that have yet to be returned in total. We recognize the value of our land and the value of our lives, as did our colonizers, as well as the governments that happily paid reparations to former slave owners as compensation for the loss of their property, in quotes, and that property for which they received compensation was paid referred to enslaved people who had been freed. Madam President, an increasingly insecure world is witnessing upward spending on defense budgets of bilateral partners and steep cuts in official development assistance. Since July 2024, it is estimated that there's been a 40% drop in humanitarian aid globally. In this era of global uncertainty, Africa must exercise sovereignty over its natural resources to raise the necessary funds to ensure the well-being of its citizens. The days of parceling out vast concession areas to foreign interests for exploitation must come to an end. We'll continue to welcome foreign investment, but we must negotiate better for a bigger share of the natural resources that belong to us. And we must insist on value addition to these resources. We're tired of the continued image of poverty-stricken, disease-ridden rural communities living at the periphery of huge foreign-controlled natural resource concession areas. We're tired of having people extract the most they can from us and in return offer us the very least by way of respect, consideration, and dignity. We're tired of not being represented in ways that reveal the richness and complexity of our history or acknowledge all that we have overcome to arrive here in this liminal space of untold possibilities. Allow me to echo the Indian-American writer Arundhati Roy, who wrote, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." I want to add that for the sake of Africa, and quite selfishly for the sake of my 18-year-old daughter, I hope that this new world that is arriving is a place of safety and equality for women and girls. To succeed, we must empower everyone, including women and girls, to reach their full potential. In closing, Madam President, I'd like to congratulate you on your election to preside over this historic 80th General Assembly and on being the 5th woman to hold this distinction. I'd also like to congratulate Her Excellency Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman on being the first woman Vice President of Ghana. Now every Ghanaian girl knows the heights to which she can ascend. Words matter, but issues of representation matter even more, which is why Ghana looks forward to the appointment of a woman as Secretary General of this organization in the near future. Madam President, Your Excellencies, I thank you for your kind attention.
And indeed, if it quacks like a duck, swings like a duck, smokes like a duck, so everything like a duck, that is certainly a duck. Now, let's do a bit of breakdown of what has happened or what we just watched, and how we're going to link it into what is happening currently, or what just happened this last week, where we are now celebrating Ghana's big move on an international market, international place. Now, the president basically has given us a way he wants to move, and his set of things he intends to execute within his. He has 2 more years. This is second year, so he has 2 more years. Now, within the next 2 years, this is what I foresee him do based on this statement and based on what we are seeing. First of all, you realize that he made it very clear that in a year's time we will come with a motion and we want to discuss this, and this has to be done. And fast forward 2026, here we are, it has happened. Now, from this same video, I can tell you that very, very soon a number of things will be happening. Now, let us not get it. That's the exciting part. Now let's just read. First off, he tells the history, or he reminds people of the history of UN and how it came about. 51 states. Then he draws it into slave trade and how it affected, how they call it the scramble for Africa. They made an organization to decide the fate of Africa. And to date, Africa is not seated, no African country is seated on the security, and that's very alarming that only 5 people get to have a say, or 5 countries actually get to have a say in what's happening. It's unfair, and the fact that no African country sits on it sends a very loud message, and the message is loud. Now, our president is not only fighting for reparation, but it's also fighting that we have a seat. An African country at least has a seat on the UN Security Panel, which is very important. And I don't know how he's going to execute it, but I'm really looking forward to it, because then this will be a case study for us to actually study. Now, I want you to actually go listen to it about 2-3 times, and you realize that he is foretelling us what he intends to do. He's foretelling that if any foreign investor wants to come into Africa, that is Ghana to be specific, they are going to negotiate hard, such that it's not going to be raw materials, come pick raw materials, go process it and come and sell it back to us. No. You're not going to do that again. And if you can see what's happening with the 24-hour economy procedures, bill, and everything going on currently, resetting Ghana, we are preparing ourselves for that. Time and time again, the president of the nation has said that, look, we are moving away from the raw material exporting. All we know how to do is exporting raw materials and nothing else. We are moving away from that. We are shifting from that. We are moving into another state where all we are doing is exporting finished goods. Just like China. China exports a lot of finished goods. Imagine China was just shipping rubber only to other places. China would not be China right now. If Africa will get to where it needs to be, if Africa will move from where we find ourselves now into a place where when we speak, other countries, other nations will listen, this is it. And the president of the Republic of Ghana has basically given us a roadmap that we are following. And it first starts from within. Now, he goes ahead to also talk about resets, and he speaks about resets in UN itself. Some of its policies must be reviewed, because he shares light on, how he has only 4 years, and coming into office feels like, I just left here like 2 days ago, and now he has to look at all the things and quickly put things into place, which would bring us to a story called soul sourcing, because that also is a very interesting story to me, because the big push agenda is massive, and I'm really looking forward to the big push agenda. I want to see how Ghana is going to look like at the end of the 4 years, roads all over. Now, he also settles down on immigration, international immigration, global south, global north, and letting the others understand that, look, your problem is not necessarily immigrants. You are fighting wars that are making people move from wherever to want to come, because nobody wants to be in a space where there's war. You and I don't think if right now there's war and people are dying left, right, for etc., you and I would want to stay in the country. So if you are fighting a lot of wars, you are creating chaoses in other places, then certainly they want to move to where it's peaceful. And if you are fighting the war, you want to move to your side because you are the stronger guy. Now, it brings me to a very important question that I've been asking myself all week. What really is going to happen? Because we had 123 countries vote in favor of the motion, and we have 3 powerful nations voting against. And then we have some countries that went quiet. So what next is going to happen? Because we all know that Uncle Sam is a big payer. The question I've been asking myself all week with regards to this is, let's be honest. I am excited that, our first gentleman of the land has set an agenda. He's serious about it. He's putting plans in place and it's working. I am excited. But then when you are dealing with a big brother who is a bully, how do you go about it? If because of this the US now say they're not going to support us in this, they're not going to do that for that. How is it going to look like? Can we survive on our own? Yes, I believe in the workings of our certain president. But the question is, are we ready for what is going to come for? The other question I've been asking myself all week is, will these checks ever come? Because you are playing with big dogs. And when I say big dogs, they are serious gang of mafias. They are serious gang of mafias. Are we really ready for what is going to come? But let's cast our mind back. Not long ago, they overthrew Nkrumah. Why? Because they felt like there was going to be a threat. Are they feeling like John Dramani Mahama is a threat to them? If so, national security, Charlie, we must speed up security with our presidency. Yeah. We should, like, before tighten the security, because it's a one-phase victory. Once checks has not been signed and we haven't received, and even when we do, what is the next phase? What is the next phase? Mr. President, I believe you know what you are doing, and you certainly know how to maneuver your way. But are we entirely safe like that? Now I'm concerned about your well-being, because Israel, America, if these two team up, they're like two big brothers, bullies. If they team up to eliminate our president, Charlie, there's very little we can do, because they support us in so many ways. So are we looking forward to losing everything? But then again, there comes a time where a young brother needs to stand up for himself and say enough is enough. And I believe we have the right man for the job. But I'm still concerned. Yes, I am. I'm very concerned. And so that takes us to our next story, the big push. Now, over the last I think it's this week, the president has been moving around and he's inspected a number of projects going on, and I'm excited about it. Like I said, big push is my thing. I'm very excited about big push, because look, anything that brings progress to Ghana, and it brings progress to the ordinary person that doesn't know any chairman, any big man anywhere, I'm all for it. Because it's a system where you need to know a big man to get anything done. If you want to go to the uni, you need to know a big man. If you want to go to law school, it's a big man. And then, by the way, speaking of law school, I'm excited that they passed this bill. That means anybody that wants to be a lawyer is going to be a fair process. You don't need to know a big man somewhere to hold your hand and connect you. And there doesn't need to be you don't need to be a part of a certain fraternity to become a lawyer anymore. Now it's fair, it's open. That's just, by the way. That was actually not part of my stories, but it just came and I said, you know what, let me share. They've done an amazing job. Look, let's give it to them. They've done an amazing job. Let's give it to them. Let's look. Now, my young folks out there, my grassroots people that want to become lawyers, this is the time. Shall they take opportunity? Shall they go to school? Go to school. We got your back. Now, big push. Big push is indeed a big push. Now, we woke up one morning and boom, Fourth Estate has released a scandal. And what was the scandal? Let me look for the image. They basically said that, Charlie, somebody has done so saucy, and that means, Charlie, somebody has basically cashed out. So they need to find out how much, where, and all those accoutrements. Now, the first thing that I believe which was proper was the road minister. The road minister went straight to Parliament to explain to them what exactly happened. And for me, I felt like that was the best thing to do, because no need for press conferences like the way MPP every day there's a new press conference. Every day you wake up, new. Hey, in fact, they should call them the press conference party. That's a joke. That's a joke. Now, yeah, they did what they could, and let's listen to what the road minister had to say. Okay, whilst I'm looking for the video, let's do some morale. I like morale. Maybe I'm a morale person, so let's do some morale as we look for the video. We found the video, and this is what the road minister had to say.
Thank you for the opportunity to give an update of the government's flagship Big Push project to this House. Right Honourable Speaker, honourable members of this August House, I present to you an update of President Mahama's flagship infrastructure development project, the Big Push. Mr. Speaker, may recall that President Mahama dedicated the first 2 years of the Big Push program to address unprecedented deplorable state of our road network. Through the Big Push infrastructure program, launched in 2025, the government is investing heavily in repairing critical roads, upgrading key economic corridors, creating jobs, and reducing the cost of doing business across all 16 regions. The program places strong emphasis on Ghanaian contractors and workers, helping to strengthen local technical expertise in construction sector. Mr. Speaker, the Big Push program has received strong support from Parliament so far. This House has approved nearly 50 billion for these multi-year road and bridge projects. We appreciate the support from leadership and members of this House. As I speak, Mr. Speaker, over 2,000 kilometers of roads in all 16 regions of our country are under extensive transformation. Mr. Speaker, in times past, we have all been concerned by the state of our roads, mindful of the amount of monies invested. In the spirit of probity, accountability, and transparency, we encourage the public to remain engaged in monitoring the project in their localities, and we always appreciate their constructive feedback. Mr. Speaker, recently, an online platform requested for details about ongoing road projects, and same was willingly and timeously provided. There was no attempt to conceal any information. I am grateful for the opportunity to update Parliament on the status of implementation of Big Push project, infrastructure project. Mr. Speaker, no ministry is subjected to as much consistent scrutiny as the Ministry of Roads. On average, about 10 questions are filed weekly, covering wide ranging issues from contract awards to project cost and timeliness. The ministry also regularly gets invitations for committees of parliament to respond to development within the sector. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the scrutiny. It strengthens accountability and ensures that we remain aligned with the expectations of Ghanaian people. I wish to assure the House that I take the responsibility entrusted in me with the utmost seriousness. I remain fully committed to delivering on our mandate with integrity, transparency, and efficiency. Mr. Speaker, prior to 2024 election, it was clear that majority of Ghanaians were not happy with the deplorable and dangerous nature of roads across the country. They made it a condition that when given the mandate, the government of President Mahama should take urgent and immediate steps to improve the country's road network. This has been justifiably followed by consistent questions of timeliness and of members of this House as to when the roads in their constituencies will be improved. Mr. Speaker, this is a House of record. Let me state unequivocally that all contracts awarded under the program were done in strict adherence to the Public Procurement Act and its accompanying regulations. Mr. Speaker, all contractual information is publicly available and on the ministry's website. The Big Push roads were identified, or the original Big Push project identified were just 12 major economic corridors across the country, which were christened the 12 disciples. These projects were later broken into 54 lots to foster competition and speed up implementation. Mr. Speaker, additionally, 23 road projects valued at 14.88 billion, which were awarded by the previous administration and abandoned by contractors due to lack of dedicated funding and were absorbed as part of Big Push. These projects were novated to be Big Push under the new funding. Mr. Speaker, these are some of the projects. The design and construction of Swami Interchange and ancillary works, Phase 1. Design and construction of Swami Interchange Local Road, Phase 2. Takoradi Agona rehabilitation and dualization of Takoradi Agona Junction, including 2 number dual carriageway bridges. Rehabilitation of Tepa Mabang Goso Road. Reconstruction of Jini Jini Sampa Road. Rehabilitation and upgrading of Kaswa Winneba Road. Rehabilitation of Kaswa Winneba, different lots up to 3. Rehabilitation of Ofankor Nsawam Road. Design, build, and dualization of Adenta Dodowa. Upgrading of Nkwanta Otidamanko Road. Upgrading of Nkwanta Otidamanko kilometer 0 to 50.3. Upgrading of Tumu Sicily Navrongo Road. Upgrading of Tumu Chichuluga Navrongo Road. Partial reconstruction of Navrongo Chichuluga Tumu Road. Upgrading of Tumu Han Laura kilometer 45 to 70. The same all the way to upgrading of Tumu Han Laura Road and construction of National Route 8 Wa Han Laura Road. Rehabilitation of Hokwe Jasikan and then construction of Have Hokwe Road. Mr. Speaker, globally, it is globally acceptable that sole sourcing even is acceptable if in situations where there is the need to extend the implementation of works which were previously competitively procured to speed up completion. Though the 23 projects I talked about that we innovated, none of them were competitively procured. They were also sourced contracts, but which were innovated at the cost of 14.8 billion Ghana cedi. Mr. Speaker, given the scale, urgency, and national importance of these projects, a mix of procurement methods were employed in accordance with the law. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that only 44% of all the major contracts included in the Big Push contract were awarded by the ministry under sole sourcing. 44%. So not what has been published by a certain online portal. We have also awarded over 400 different contracts through open competitive bidding, over 400, which is unprecedented because the record shows that from 2017 to 2024, almost all projects that the ministry carried out were sole sourced. Almost all the projects were sole sourced. It will therefore be mischievous for any right-thinking member of society to conclude that the Ministry of Road and Highways only procures work through sole sourcing. Mr. Speaker, I have already mentioned the deplorable state of the road network across the country we inherited from our colleagues. This had brought untold hardship to the motoring public and contributed massively to the food inflation. This led to public agitation and the survival of the state. Mr. Speaker, something needed to be done and done urgently. Mr. Speaker, with dedicated funding already secured under the Big Push program, was both prudent and necessary to proceed swiftly to ensure value for money and avoid cost overruns associated with long procurement and implementation timelines. Mr. Speaker, most of the project would not have started until date if we hadn't adopted a faster route. Mr. Speaker, the following projects, for example, wouldn't have been continued or started. The Kaswa-Winneba and then Kaswa Interchange Road, which is in my good friend, the minority leader's constituency. The dualization of Winneba Cape Coast, the Swami Interchange project, which was stalled, but now has gotten a new life, the Kumasi Outer Ring Road, and the Ofankor and Sawam Road are part of this. Mr. Speaker, we put in place the following mechanisms to ensure value for money in terms of cost, quality, and longevity. Contrary to the practice under previously under the Big Push program, agencies did their own survey, design, costing, saving billions. Mr. Speaker, I say this because in the past, this project would have been designed and built. Mr. Speaker, by asking the agencies to actually do our design costing, we have saved at least 5% of the cost of the project. So we started saving money on this project, making sure that the country gets the best in terms of the value for money. Contractors were then invited to submit proposals. Their proposals were then subjected to independent value for money assessment. We have instituted a stricter monitoring and cost control mechanism to ensure we only pay for works done. Mr. Speaker, we have now established a system where no contractor will walk away with a CD without working for it. Mr. Speaker, we have also reached an understanding with the Ghana Institution of Surveyors to develop a local capacity of members to be licensed as independent value for money auditors. Mr. Speaker, it is important to point out the deliberate falsehood that rely on simplified metrics such as cost per kilometer without considering the scope of works. Mr. Speaker, for the avoidance of doubt, under the recent leadership of President Mahama, road projects have not been unjustifiably suspended or terminated. The huge unpaid debt of over 40 billion has also received attention of the government. Over 11 billion has been paid so far to contract all awarded or inherited from our brothers from the other side. The government has not abandoned any ongoing project. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the Accra-Kumasi bypass project have not been abandoned. Indeed, we have completed one of the lots and have taken it over. Mr. Speaker, the rest of the lots have been programmed to be budgeted for in the 2027 budget if Parliament approves. However, Mr. Speaker, the cost to complete, including the outstanding debt of the Kumasi bypasses, is estimated at 6 billion Ghana cedis today. Mr. Speaker, let me state emphatically that when it comes to the Big Push program, Parliament exercised continuous oversight. Questions are answered regularly on the floor of the House. Independent professional bodies validated the project cost. Procurement processes complied with established legal framework. There is no abuse of the sole sourcing program. Unlike previous, it is exception and not the norm. Indeed, no procurement law or any other law has been breached, and definitely there is no scandal. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Big Push program, no, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I call on Mr. Speaker, I say this as a matter of fact. I am not responding to anybody except those who are falsifying information on social media. Mr. Speaker, the NDC did not award over 70 billion cedis worth of work under the Big Push. Indeed, we said 54 billion of that was for new works, and then the 23 projects were projects that we inherited, costing another 14.8 billion. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, there's spurious information online that 76% of Big Push
just go ahead with your
projects
statement.
were sole source is also false. Only about 44% of those projects were procured through sole sourcing. And I state on record, Mr. Speaker, we are making progress as a House and as a country to make sure that much of our procurement is done competitively. But that is why I'm saying that those who claim to have done this so-called analysis based on data we submitted to them freely didn't help the country. Because if they did due diligence, they would have known that those percentages they put outside were pure fabrications and false. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, President Mahama's government has taken steps to improve the procurement process. And as a matter of fact, as I said, I'm not having a go at our colleagues on the other side. I say that today as a minister, almost the 110 billion cedis worth of projects we inherited were all procured through sole sourcing. I don't blame them, Mr. Speaker. I sat on this side of the House not too long ago when the people of Swami were demonstrating against the respected former leader, Honorable Chairman Sabonsu. I supported the fact that we should procure the Swami interchange through sole sourcing because it was urgent and we needed to do it. When the motorway was awarded to Motor Angels, a foreign company, and they couldn't raise the financing, I was one of the first people to say that let's terminate the work and get a Ghanaian contractor to do it. In this House, we also agreed that that project should also be awarded on sole sourcing to the contractor Maripoma. Mr. Speaker, I say this simply because the impression is that when we were in opposition, we said nothing about sole sourcing was good, and when we were now in government, we are doing the opposite. Mr. Speaker, what I presented to you today shows that everything has to be done in context. What I will say here, Mr. Speaker, majority, all Big Push projects are on site and are ongoing, and by the end of 2027, Mr. Speaker, you will see a lot of completed road projects that would enhance our economy, make our roads safer, and this is why I tell colleagues, let us work together to make sure that we protect the Big Push. Let us not fall for any agenda of anybody outside of this House. This is the House of Parliament. The debate, the formulation of policy of anything that has to do with governance stands here, and not anybody outside. And I want to take...
And unfortunately, this is what time can permit us to go. It's almost, it's actually 11. Now let me just do a quick take on it and then we go. Now, for facts and facts only, now, this is what I think. I see nothing wrong with sole sourcing. However, what the president actually said was the abuse of sole sourcing, and not the fact that it was a bad thing. Now, my understanding is that certain projects needed to be executed immediately. One of them is the Winneba stretch, with the construction that is going on in that space. I mean, Winneba is one place I love going. It's a beautiful, quiet, old ghost town, and I love the peace and quiet it brings. But that's not the reason. One of is that there's the Ofanko and there's one on the Swami interchange. Now, all these projects, it had to be treated with a certain urgency. Now, if we were going to go through the normal process, like I'm sure by this time they'll still be in the process, and it's a very cumbersome process. And for the fact that these projects were inherited, I mean, aluta continua, continue. Go ahead with the project. Let's find money for it. Let's help the people. Let's make the lives of people easier. And fast forward as we see, those roads are that interchange on bring your name. Sure. The Ofankwa interchange, beautifully done, beautifully, wonderfully done. You know, they are really doing their best to make sure Ghana becomes a better place. Now, for facts, it's only 44% of the contracts that are actually sole sourced. Over 400 of them open tender. If you feel you have the capacity, the muscles to execute, come, plead your case, bring your documents. They look at you. Do you meet our requirements? Do you lobby? You get it. You don't get it, you try again another time. But what did you see in the previous government? It wasn't like that. You don't even hear anything is happening. Next thing you realize, we are cutting a sword for this, we are cutting a sword for that, we're doing this. But you actually never hear, you never see any, like, you don't even hear wind of it. Next thing you realize, it's happening, you know? But this is all time can afford us with. We promise to get better by the weeks, get better microphones, and we'll work at it. We will become number one. Friday live show, you will not want to miss it. So thank you for everybody that watched, even if it was for a minute or two. We had a few technical challenges, but we're glad you made it to the very end. If you see this later in the week, sometime, if somebody tells you, do subscribe, post us on post notification, and we'll constantly bring you content that will blow your mind. Have a very good evening from myself and my team out there. And then again, let me put it out there, we are looking for a graphic designer. So if you're a graphic designer out there and you feel you want to be part of the next big thing that is going to happen, then shoot me a message and let's talk. Until then, same time next week.